Hello, I am Editor Than Mai. I will provide you with the latest information of the day. Southern Baptist delegates at national meeting overwhelmingly call for banning same-sex marriage. DALLAS, AP. Southern Baptist delegates at their national meeting overwhelmingly endorsed a ban on same-sex marriage, including a call for reversal of the U.S. Supreme Court's 10-year-old precedent legalizing it nationwide. They also called for legislators to curtail sports betting and to support policies that promote childbearing. The votes Tuesday came at the gathering of more than 10,000 church representatives at the annual meeting of the nation's largest Protestant denomination. The wide-ranging resolution doesn't use the word ban, but it left no room for legal same-sex marriage in calling for the overturning of laws and court rulings, including Obergefell versus Hodges, that defy God's design for marriage and family. Further, the resolution affirmatively calls for laws that affirm marriage between one man and one woman. A reversal of the Supreme Court's 2015 Obergefell decision wouldn't in and of itself amount to a nationwide ban. At the time of that ruling, 36 states had already legalized same-sex marriage, and support remains strong in many areas. However, if the convention got its wish, not only would Obergefell be overturned, but so would every law and court ruling that affirmed same-sex marriage. There was no debate on the marriage resolution. That in itself is not surprising in the solidly conservative denomination, which has long defined marriage as between one man and one woman. However, it marks an especially assertive step in its call for the reversal of a decade-old Supreme Court ruling, as well as any other legal pillars to same-sex marriage in law and court precedent, gender identity, fertility, and other issues. The marriage issue was incorporated into a much larger resolution on marriage and family, one that calls for civil law to be based on what the Convention says is the divinely created order, as stated in the Bible. The resolution says legislators have a duty to pass laws that reflect the truth of creation and natural law about marriage, sex, human life, and family, and to oppose laws contradicting what God has made plain through nature and Scripture. The same resolution calls for recognizing the biological reality of male and female, and opposes any law or policy that compels people to speak falsehoods about sex and gender. It urges Christians to embrace marriage and childbearing, and to see children as blessings rather than burdens. But it also frames that issue as one of public policy. It calls for renewed moral clarity in public discourse regarding the crisis of declining fertility, and for policies that support the bearing and raising of children within intact, married families. It laments that modern culture is pursuing willful childlessness, which contributes to a declining fertility rate, echoing a growing subject of discourse on the religious and political right. The pornography resolution, which had no debate, calls such material destructive, addictive and exploitive, and says governments have the power to ban it. The sports betting resolution draws on Southern Baptists' historic opposition to gambling. It called sports betting harmful and predatory. One pastor urged an amendment to distinguish between low-stakes, recreational gambling and predatory, addictive gambling activities. But his proposed amendment failed. Whistleblowers' death casts pall on Dallas meeting. The two-day annual meeting began Tuesday morning with praise sessions and optimistic reports about growing numbers of baptisms. But casting a pall over the gathering is the recent death of one of the most high-profile whistleblowers in the Southern Baptists' scandal of sexual abuse, Jennifer Lyle, one-time denominational publishing executive, who went public in 2019 with allegations that she had been sexually abused by a seminary professor while a student, died Saturday at 47. She suffered catastrophic strokes. A friend and fellow advocate, Rachel Den Hollander, posted Sunday on X. Friends reported that the backlash Lyle received after going public with her report took a devastating toll on her. Several abuse survivors and advocates for reform, who previously had a prominent presence in recent SBC meetings, are skipping this year's gathering, citing lack of progress by the convention. Two people sought to fill that void, standing vigil outside of the meeting at the K. Bailey Hutchison Convention Center, Dallas, as attendees walked by. The pair held up signs with photos of Lyle and of Gerald Dwayne Rollins, who died earlier this spring and who was among those who accused longtime SBC power broker Paul Pressler of sexual abuse, It's not a healthy thing for them, survivors, to be here, said Jonna Harris, host of a podcast on abuse in evangelical ministries. I felt like it was important for someone to show up. I want people to know there are people who care. Past attempts at reforms in the SBC Executive Committee, in a 2022 apology, acknowledged its failure to adequately listen, protect, and care for Jennifer Lyle when she came forward to share her story. It also acknowledged the denomination's official news agency had not accurately reported the situation as sexual abuse by a trusted minister in a position of power at a Southern Baptist seminary. SBC officials issued statements this week lamenting Lyle's death, but her fellow advocates have denounced what they say is a failure to implement reforms. The SBC's 2022 meeting voted overwhelmingly to create a way to track pastors and other church workers credibly accused of sex abuse. That came shortly after the release of a blockbuster report by an outside consultant, which said Southern Baptist leaders mishandled abuse cases and stonewalled victims for years. But the denomination's executive committee president, Jeff Iorg, said earlier this year that creating a database is not a focus, and that the committee instead plans to refer churches to existing databases of sex offenders and focus on education about abuse prevention. The committee administers the denomination's day-to-day business. Advocates for reform don't see those approaches as adequate. It is the latest instance of officials trailing out hollow words, impotent task forces, and phony dog and pony shows of reform. Abuse survivor and longtime advocate Krista Brown wrote on Baptist News Global, which is not SBC-affiliated. In a related action, the executive committee will also be seeking $3 million in convention funding for ongoing legal expenses related to abuse cases. What else is on the agenda? As of late Tuesday afternoon, attendance was at 10,541 church representatives, known as messengers. That is less than a quarter of the total that thronged the SBC's annual meeting 40 years ago this month in a Dallas showdown that marked the height of battles over control of the convention, ultimately won by the more conservative fundamentalist side led by Pressler and his allies. Messengers will also debate whether to institute a constitutional ban on churches with women pastors and to abolish its public policy arm, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, which is staunchly conservative. But according to critics, not enough so. Brent Leatherwood, president of the EILC, said Tuesday he would address the turbulence during his scheduled remarks Wednesday, but was confident in the messenger's support. Please like and subscribe to wait for the next information. Goodbye and see you again.